Alright, so today what we're going to bring you is the repair and replace of a Game Boy Color, and if you'll notice, this is the Pokemon Special Edition one, speaker, because the speaker in mine is rusted. It sounds like crap. So your first things you do is obviously take out the batteries, take off the back case, set that aside, make sure you have some certain tools with you, because there's a few screws that you have to actually take out. You're going to need a tri-wing screwdriver, and you're going to need your replacement speaker. You're also going to need your desoldering bulb, which sometimes helps. Then you're going to need a soldering pen. Mine is one from Radio Shack, and it runs on butane, so I don't have any wires, and it runs on gas. You have to light it and let it get hot. If you'll notice, the one that your striker doesn't actually work so well, the one that comes with it, but it can if you take your time, or you can just use a lighter, which also helps. You're going to want to let that get hot, but in a safe direction. I have a few more things that you need are going to be, if you'll notice, the helping hands magnifier and holding device. Also the soldering pen, you have to make sure the flames are red. You don't want flame coming out. It should be red and heating up that way. So I'm just doing that over there. Okay, so all that stuff's out of the way. Oh yeah, clean up your soldering. Weld wire, rosin core, whatever you want. Just try to go lead free, because that way you don't have to worry about the smell. Alright, clean off your soldering pen once it starts to get warm on a wet sponge. It cleans all the old gunk off. You're going to see me do that a couple of times throughout to make sure it stays clean so the solders are good. Takes a bit of time sometimes. Alright, get into it. Take our tri-wing screwdriver, and these first two screws are the only ones that you're going to want to set inside the back of the case, because when you lift the back off, the rest of the screws will stay with it, but those top two won't. So you're going to want to put them off to the side so you don't lose them, because that holds the top where your IR sensor and a whole bunch of other crap are for your Game Boy Color. Now, once you get those screws out, make sure you don't knock them off the table. You probably want to have more of a working space in this. I was trying to do everything close together so you can see everything as it goes. Alright, now those screws out of the way. See, it's tri-wing. It's a different screwdriver than normal. It's not a regular miniature screwdriver. It's got 3 points. It usually comes in the set if you buy a new shell case for your Game Boy Color. I didn't need it, but I also didn't want to. It's $10 for the case and new buttons, and it comes with a speaker. Or you can spend $5 on just the speaker. So I figured $5 more, and then I'll have extra parts in the long run. But I bought a purple case, I guess. So if anybody has a Game Boy Color that they don't want anymore, or just want to have a new case on it, be more than happy if you send it to me to replace the case on it and send it back to you. Or you can do it yourself. Either way. But yeah, there's about 6 screws in total you have to take before you can take the back off. The back comes off neat, not connected to anything else, just set it off to the side out of the way. If you look on the inside, you're going to notice 3 small screws that hold the main circuit board. Well, that's the speaker we're replacing. It holds the main circuit board to the plastic body of the front. Now, be careful when you do this, because everything minus the screen is all attached as one. Like, everything is together. But this is a regular screwdriver and those 3 screws. Tri-wing screwdriver's not going to work for those. So you're going to have to go and get your fancy, tiny little working screwdriver set. I have a fancy Radio Shack one that I use for certain projects, just because it has the spin knobs, and that kind of helps whenever you're trying to hold pressure on tiny screws. That means you can just put your hand on it, press it, the back end spins freely, so you can unscrew without having to move it on your hands. So you take your screwdriver, Gonna put in the right bit, make sure it's the right size. I want to say the one I used was a number 1. I forget, but just don't use one that's too small. You'll strip out the inner threads of the screws. Don't try to use one that's too big, because you'll do the same thing. You need the Goldilocks, if you will, of screwdriver bits, so that way you can keep using the same screws. Also, a new case shell body comes with new screws inside of the kit. I have the kit. I'll probably do something later if I ever get an extra Game Boy Color that I can just replace, and I'll do the whole thing, minus the speaker, because most speakers aren't bad. I bought this one with a bad speaker from Game Exchange in Texas for like $20, just because I wanted a Game Boy Color, and mine was stolen, which I don't understand why it was stolen. It was covered in like green acrylic paint from when I was like 10 years old, and I thought that was a cool thing to do to an already green Game Boy, so there's that. Okay, so now that you have this part, be careful in lifting it, because the screen, like I said, is attached with the ribbon cable, and you could just take it apart, but since all I'm doing is replacing the speaker, I'm going to leave it in place, make sure nothing's loose. I'm just going to lift it up, and then, yeah, don't lose any screws, because that one was not smart. Alright, you're going to lift it up, and what I did was I took the speaker off. Not like ripped it off. No, I just unbraided the wires holding it, making sure to mark where the negative and positive are, the wires on it, so that way I wired up right the first time. And then keep that either in your mind, you can write it down if you have trouble forgetting. On the back of the new speakers, most of the time it'll mark which terminal post is positive and which is negative. If you look, you'll notice on there, if you know anything about circuitry, you'll see SP1, which is power source 1, like, and then you'll have your ground, which is the negative terminal. Now, I just used my helping hands after I clean my soldering pen again, because they get dirty from the solder that's left on them. I just clamped that old speaker in, put my magnifying glass over it so I can see clearly where I'm at, so I'm not burning anything unnecessarily. I'm using the desoldering bulb to the best of my abilities in the small space, and just separate those wires. You just barely want to touch it to where the solder loosens and then the wire comes out. And if you have any leftover solder, the desoldering bulb can, pull that off for you, so you don't have it hanging around. Now that we got that out of the way and the old speaker's off, you're gonna, again, clean the pin, set it out of the way somewhere, make sure you don't burn anything, or just, hang on to it, because you're gonna be resoldering the wires, grabbing them. Make sure you line them up without breaking them. Check the wires to make sure they're not worn out or anything's broken on them. Okay, so you want to make sure everything's good before you resolder, because if you have to replace a wire, you want to do it after you've already tried to resolder a new like the wire to the new speaker, because then the old solder is gonna be melted out. It might burn out the circuit. Like, there's a little chip that everything's attached to on the back ring. You don't want to try to burn anything out. So make sure the wires are good, and replace them if you have to before you go to the next step, which is slowly soldering them on carefully. You want to try to put the wire on top of it, or heat the wire and then press it on slowly, but you don't want to apply the heat directly to the speaker, because that'll just burn the solder. It's a very thin coat of solder, and soldering pins get really hot. So you want to try to heat the pin, and then the solder will cool the wire inside of it, which will give you a better seal on your solder. And you want to be gentle. You don't want to try to use too much solder, because too much solder, adds resistance, and it looks ugly. You want it to look pretty by the time you're done, pretty and functional. So once you get that first one hooked on, you're pretty set. Clean it up, and then you're going to try to put the second wire on, which, if you'll notice, they put a lot of length of wire in between the speaker and the circuit board. So I imagine these were probably done either by hand in a factory when they were originally made, or just the lack of the precision in robots leads you to believe they had to have a big room for error, because in modern stuff like that, the speaker wires are not as long as the wires are on the Game Boy Colors of the past. So be careful when you're trying to put that solder on, because like I said, you can burn off the old solder quick, the pre-solder that's already on the speakers. It comes with enough solder to put the wires on if you do it right, so you don't have to gob it on or try to put more solder on. But as you see, I touched a spot and I removed a bit of solder, so I have to go back, add just a little minute amount of solder, and I'm just touching it with the iron because it's going to stick to the iron. I'm going to press it off into the wire. Like, once the wire is the best place to have it stuck into when you're doing a new solder project, but slowly press it on, and once you get a firm grip, turn off your pen, set it off to cool, or just have it out of the way. And now you're going to reassemble everything carefully back in there. So you're going to want to try to readjust that speaker without breaking any connections in those wires into that little slip that it fits into. And you're going to press the body back down, but be careful to put the wires out of the way, but to not put too much tension on them, because they're not very strong wires anyways. They're meant to be inside of a hard plastic case and not really be touched. So once you get everything kind of lined up in there, push down. You're going to want to have to hold it because the buttons touching the table will push the board up and you won't be able to screw it in place, or something will be misaligned. So carefully screw everything back in, do everything in the reverse order. Make sure you start with the center screw on the circuit board because it'll hold the main body back in place properly, and then put in the other two in any order. It doesn't really matter as long as everything's seated evenly. It should it should fit in perfectly, like slip in there just right. There shouldn't be any struggle. If you feel like there's resistance when you're trying to put the body, like put anything back together, stop and check where your areas are at. Make sure everything's lined up, because if you just push it, you're gonna break something, or you're putting tension in a spot that none of it has tension normally. So put the body back on. The screws should still be lined up, and now you're gonna switch it back to your tri-wing screwdriver that comes with a kit also. And you're gonna usually start with the battery ones because you gotta line those up with the back. Really, everything else kind of fits in. Just once you get those two screws in, two more just above it next to the other hardware. And don't over tighten them, because if you break the case or you put too much tension on it, it doesn't help. They just have to be in snug. They don't have to be like pressure tightened. If you'll notice, I can feel the tension, and as soon as it's got a good grip, I can feel it, I let go. Put in the last two screws in the top, make sure everything slips in there, which it should. Screw it back in to spec, if you will. Don't over tighten. You never want to put if you break the case, you're gonna have to replace the case. And if you're already putting a new case on, like that, you pretty much, the only other steps you have is the front piece is a little bit different. But if you're putting a new case on it and you break it, you're gonna be mad, because most of these don't have 2-day shipping for Amazon, so you're gonna be waiting like a couple of weeks to get the new case. Like I ordered that kit like a couple months ago, and I finally got it today, so I made the video. So yeah, you're gonna be waiting a while. But here's the sound of the Game Boy that I will display for you. Okay, so the sound didn't record very well on my camera, so I'm going to put it next to my microphone and you can hear the new speaker.